Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about the Queen of Swords card that I've created for my own Kate Bush tarot deck. And I talked quite a lot about the different queens in my babushka video. So if you haven't watched that video already, I'll provide a link. But if you watch that video, you can get a better idea of my different views on the queens. So I'm not really going to talk much today about my interpretation of the Queen of Swords. Check out that video if you want to know more about that. If you've seen the title, you'll know that a lot of what I want to talk about is the kind of weirdness and how that relates to the Queen of Swords and the song I've chosen. And if you know your Kate Bush songs really well, you probably have already guessed which song I have chosen for the Queen of Swords from that title. The song comes from this album, the Dreaming album, and I thought I would just quickly talk about quite a weird experience I had when I first listened to this album when I was 15, 16. So my parents had gone away and I had a friend staying over, and I'd bought this record and I hadn't had a chance to listen to it yet. And I think it was definitely dark, maybe a winter evening, I can't remember. But I had a little record player in my room and we were listening to this album. And it's got a very strange, unearthly feel to this album. I mean, I know you could say that of quite a few Kate Bush albums, for example, the Never Forever that I was talking about with the Babushka video, but it already felt like an intense experience listening to this on the record. And while I was listening with a friend, I mean, I was quite a young 16, so that's why a friend was staying over, because I probably wasn't quite mature enough to be trusted to be in the house on my own. And I think, I don't know whether I'm remembering this correctly, but I think we'd got to get out of my house and suddenly all the lights went and I think the record kept playing. So we were listening to this kind of creepy record on our own with no adults there in the dark. And I mean, I think a bulb had blown in the hallway and I was too young to understand about circuit boards and the fuse had blown or whatever. So I didn't quite understand why there were no lights on in upstairs, but the electricity was still going and this record was still playing. And I suppose I tell you that because in the Babushka video I was talking about Never Forever and how that was a really intense experience, because I was only probably about 6 or 7 when I first listened to that record. And then I had a big break in my early teens where I didn't really listen to Kate Bush. I think I'd probably heard Running Up That Hill and knew that, but wasn't really that interested in her. And then 15, 16, I bought Sensual World album on a tape. I was away from home, I was in a youth hostel, and I remember listening to that in the dark, trying to get to sleep in this dormitory in the youth hostel. And then again, this one being introduced kind of to listening to those sounds in the dark. And there's something about hearing music, I think, either on headphones or with the lights off, which makes the whole experience, more intense, and it gets under your skin more. So it's interesting that with Kate Bush music, I've had these intense introductions to her music, which I think is also why it has stayed with me, why it's managed to penetrate my imagination. And then I suppose it's interesting, isn't it? If I hadn't had those experiences, would I have had such a close relationship with her music? Would I have identified with it so much? Anyway, I've talked about that. I'll get on with business and talk about the card now. So this is the card. I actually really like this card. This is one of the favourite ones that I've made. I think because I felt like when I'm not that pleased with all my cards, but this one felt like I was expressing something of myself, and also that by looking at the Kate Bush song, I had got a different perspective on the Queen of Swords, and one that was actually going to be really helpful for me going forward. So the song is Leave It Open, and Kate Bush herself said something along the lines of that we tend to close our minds and open our mouths too readily, when really it should be the other way around. We should keep our mouths open. We should keep our minds open and our mouths shut. And the song, to me, seems to be all about the kind of power of words. So on the one hand, yeah, words can hurt people, but they can also empower people. And I think that is the main message of the Queen of Swords. Are we going to use our language to make someone feel better, to be truthful, or are we going to use our language in a way that is destructive or hurtful? And I think it's interesting that at the very end, where there's that really strange singing, creepy singing at the end, and I didn't know what she was singing. I had to find out. And she's singing We Let the Weirdness In. And I was starting to think, well, how does letting the weirdness in, how does that correlate with the Queen of Swords? And I started to think about the word weird. And I will link, there's an interesting article which I read a couple of days ago, which is about the cultural, how our usage of the word weird has changed. So, as you may know already, weird started off life as a noun, and it meant fate or destiny. And then Shakespeare in Macbeth uses it in reference to the witches. And the witches are weird because they predict Macbeth's destiny. And then later on in the 19th century, we get weird used as an adjective to describe anything which is kind of unearthly or creepy or unexplained. So like I just said about my weird experience with first listening to this album. But then, what this article was really interesting, it was talking about, I don't know much about US politics, but it was talking about how in the recent presidential campaign that Kamala Harris's campaign had used the term weird against Donald Trump. And they were saying that Kamala Harris, being born in 1964, and that with her generation especially, that weird is seen, or being a weirdo is seen as a real slur. And I was born in the 70s, and this record released in the 80s, and there was still that real stigma against the word weird. And it's got other connotations for me as well, being neurodivergent, because I think, well, don't want to generalise, but I would say nearly everyone who's neurodivergent has been called weird at some point. And there's that othering and that shame involved with feeling that you can't fit in. And that there's something wrong with you rather than society. And Kate Bush is really challenging that kind of weirdness in this song. But the article was saying it wasn't really until the 90s, when we had Weird and Wonderful, that people started to see weird as a positive expression of creativity, of being an individual, being different in a good way. And maybe that using that weird slur is well, I hope it's become a little bit old-fashioned and a bit, I mean, I say that, and I've got 2 daughters, and I'm sure they heard the weird slur as well. So unfortunately it hasn't really moved to an entirely positive thing. But this song is a celebration of weirdness. It is strange to listen to. It is weird and wonderful. But I think it's also saying, if we think when we call something weird, it's often because we feel a little bit threatened by it. We might not believe it has the same power as the witches in Macbeth, but there is still a fear, I think, attached to it. So if we think about what people we call weird, or situations we call weird, or we might say someone is being weird with us, it is kind of a way of we're pushing it, what makes us feel uncomfortable, we're pushing that away. It's a way of not really addressing, we're blaming the situation or the other person for making us feel uncomfortable, rather than really kind of, being open-minded and thinking, what is it that's making me feel uneasy here? And Queen of Swords is like a truth teller, and she can, cut through delusions for other people, but she can cut through self-delusion as well. And that involves having an open mind. The pictures I used, so this I think is, I'll put the reference down where I got this from, but it is a live photo, and I think it's from James and the Cold Gun, it looks like. So 1970s, before this album. But I liked the look of paranoia on her face, the defensiveness there, which is definitely the shadow side of Queen of Swords, attack before you attacked yourself. This lovely picture here is called Cactus Man. It is by Odilon Redon, and I've had to cut the spines off to do the collage, but I thought, well, that's kind of also the message, isn't it? He's not got his prickles there now to attack people. He is more open. And this is a William Blake picture, and it's from Book of Job. And to me, this represents the kind of monsters of the unconscious, the things that we fear in weirdness, which really are a reflection of ourselves. So the lyrics I've chosen are, "We let the weirdness in." And this is really a reminder for me, when I get this card, to think, how am I judging something? What am I scared of? Where do I need to be more open-minded? So that's my take on the Queen of Swords. Let me know what you think, and thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.